Welcome to Economics Happy Hour. My name's Matt.
And I'm Jadrian.
Great to have you here with us today. Thank you for tuning in. Jadrian, what's new?
I just got back from a little personal trip. So getting bogged down in Blacksburg, I need a little. Blacksburg's a great place to be, but it's a small town, right? Selinsgrove is it's a great small town.
Yep.
For a couple weeks at a time, and then you get that itch to get out and get away. So I did that. I got the itch. I needed to leave. I drove down to Bristol, Tennessee, which is turns out it's only like 2.5 hours away or so.
Okay.
Because they have a bunch of collegiate summer baseball teams down there, and I wanted to mark off some stadiums. But really cool thing happened. Do you know what Bristol is famous for?
Motor Speedway.
Motor Speedway. That's right, sir. I am addicted to just doing really weird things. It just so happened the weekend I was down there, the Rusty Wallace driving experience was in town. I got to ride in a NASCAR around the Bristol Speedway for 5 or 6 laps.
That would be a blast.
Yeah,
that would be fun.
It was a Father's Day special, so I got it for $100. I got to ride in circles.
Oh, that's a great deal. That's a great deal.
Yeah, I did the riding. I didn't do the driving. You could drive a couple laps. I think that started at $200. But I don't drive a manual, and they kind of told us, they were like, "Look, if you drive, you need to drive a lot of laps to make it worth it." And I'm not dropping like hundreds of dollars to do this.
Yeah.
And they said, like, you're never going to go as fast as the professional drivers are going to go.
Sure.
So you might as well sit in the passenger seat and just enjoy it. So
yeah,
I got to go down. Like I walked through the tunnel of Bristol, got to go out there, put the suit on, the helmet. Tons of fun. Just it's I love doing just really weird things.
Neat. Yeah, you check off stadiums, and you've checked off more than I have. Like I do, check off Broadway shows. Mm-hmm. But we went to a show Saturday. The Tonys was a week ago Sunday, and in our house, that's like, we literally have a Tonys party, like people would do a Super Bowl party, but for the Tony Awards with themed drinks and foods and all of the stuff. But we saw Leah Polstad, which won Best Play, which absolutely fantastic. It's only on. By the time this episode drops, actually, it's not on Broadway anymore.
Okay.
But it may tour. So if it does tour, I'd highly recommend it for anybody.
So this is, I made this comment, actually. I think I tweeted it. I quote tweeted it because I realized I had hit the 200 mark. So I'm over 200 on stadiums. And just hearing you say it, I think is a good chance for us to talk about it. And I think it's true for this podcast too. I feel incredibly fortunate that we have the types of jobs that let us do these really goofy things.
Sure.
Right. That you can go to New York easily and go watch Broadway shows, or you can go travel. Like if you're in a different city, we have such flexibility with our jobs that we can do these sorts of cool things. Yeah.
And seeing shows is like literally, I wrote Broadway and economics book, and I maintain the website. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's a lot of fun, but I also think like it's kind of a little bit of work. There's an audience, and it's really, really fun work. Yeah, but it's also work, which is fantastic. Yeah,
it's super interesting. Like I don't think much of the stadium stuff. It's something that I'd like personally do for fun, and I put online. It is always really surprising when I meet people and they are like shocked that I go to this many stadiums and that I've been to these places. And it turns into things where people are like, "Oh, we're going to invite you for a talk so that you can get more stadiums." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like you're going to pay me to go do what I like to do anyway, and I get to see stadiums. Tons of fun."
Yeah, I've had people in different colleges say they'd like to invite me down at some point. And some of the time it's not for money. If it's at a college, it'd be to come present, but they'll cover the expenses. And I'll be like, that's fantastic. When is the football or basketball team playing?
Yes.
And whenever that is, then I'm good.
I'm like, look, there didn't have to be a game. I go, you just put me in connection with somebody who will unlock the stadium, and I'm pumped. As long as I don't have to take the outside picture, I'm super excited. So that happened at C-Tree. Mike Urbanchik, super cool guy. He's the big lecturer at Oregon. I think he's on like their board of directors for the student bookstore, which is placed in the stadium. So like he knows a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy. And so they were able to get me like an official like University of Oregon tour, and they like walked me through different parts of the stadium and stuff.
Very cool.
It was so cool. Just to be able to go inside rather than just take a picture from the outside.
Yeah.
But Bristol it was so cool to be standing in the middle, hearing the race cars going around. It was so cool. That's such a cool experience.
So what are you drinking today?
All right. I am going to your hometown. Well, I'm going to call it hometown. I'm your neighboring town. I went to Black State College a couple months ago to see a friends and watch some softball. And I got a gift. I got 2 6-packs of beers that I have never had from your nearby, I think, favorite brewery. I'm gonna call it your favorite. At least it's one of your favorites.
Rusty Rail.
Little Rusty Rail. So I'm gonna show you the bottom half of it.
Yeah.
So he went through my Untapped and like checked to see if I had any of these. So he's a good friend. I'm having
that's really cool.
I know, right? He's a good guy. The cheat day blackberry cobbler sour, and I decided to go deep into my pint glass cabinet. I got a blue pint glass from the Atlantic Brewery up in Maine. I went with my parents a few before the pandemic. Bar Harbor, Maine is the America's original blueberry ale. Bar Harbor Blueberry Ale is what they're famous for. So I figured I'd get a blueberry ale cup and a blackberry sour. That's as close as I can get to it. So something a little different. So yeah, Pennsylvania.
My wife she's not happy with the number of pint glasses we already have. So a pint glass collection is not something that would make our marriages sustainable. So
this smells so good.
I am it's summertime. I wanted something a little light and refreshing, so I went to one I have had before, but have a Moscow Mule.
Is this a Virgin Moscow Mule?
This is not one. Okay. This one has the vodka in it, but those who listen regularly will recall that during dry January, Virgin Moscow Mule gives you the illusion of having a drink without having a drink. So
I will put this in our show notes, but I plan on tweeting this, so my Twitter followers will see it. Those of you who don't follow me on Twitter, that's perfectly okay. You can get this in the show notes. I was at Kroger the other day. I think you'll find this kind of interesting. The Simply Lemonade, Simply Orange Juice company. They make in the bottles, right? Simply juice. I was walking by the other day. They are now in the mixology business. I'll see if I can hold my phone up here. See if that'll focus. It won't. But they have Simply Mixology Lime Margarita. So you pour a little bit of, right? They're basically making mixers.
So you put the tequila with it and you've got the mixing.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you already got the mix ready. And I just looked at that and I go, that is an amazing, forethought of I'm going to mix 2 industries. People are already using my limeade to make this. We might as well capitalize on it too. They've got all the stuff to make it.
Perfect.
Yeah. I thought that was neat. Yeah. Good expand, right? Horizontal, I don't teach vertical and horizontal integration, right? So horizontal marketing, something like that.
I would think that, expanding the product line, I think that'd be horizontal. No, I'll wait until they come up with the Simply IPA. But
you might be able to get maybe you'll get a Simply Moscow. Maybe they'll start making a ginger beer,
Simply Mule mix
with some lime.
It's so easy to make that though. You pour in the ginger beer, you pour in lime juice. I mean, but they do have some of those still. They'll have the pre-made mix for those who. Pouring the lime juice and the ginger beer separately is too much work.
So let me give a shout out to Rusty Rail. This is actually, when I was in State College, this was one of my favorite breweries. It is in Mifflinburg, PA. It has some of the most intense flavors. If you get I don't want to call it a flavored beer, but if it says that it is a peanut butter stout, you will when you drink it, you will have no doubt that there's peanut butter in it.
Yes.
Compared to, I've had chocolate stouts where I'm I guess there's chocolate in this. I guess there's coffee in this coffee stout. I'm already psyched for this because I know that this is about to give me huge flavors of blackberry cobbler when I drink it.
Very nice. Yeah, it's about a half hour from Selinsgrove, Mifflinburg. So it's a nice little town, a really cool brewery. So, and we're not sponsored by them. So
yet,
this is the authentic.
For those of you,
yes.
If you work at Rusty Rail.
So we have we think it's interesting show for you today. We're going to go through a list of economics books, give you our thoughts, and then also share our opinions on some of our favorite econ books.
So actually, Matt, I was thinking about this earlier. A couple episodes ago, you and I talked about game theory. We completely forgot to talk about this in the last episode. So I guess this is enough time has passed. We actually played a game and we said we posted it in the show notes about which answer was the least popular answer. Since we're trying to get people more involved, right? Figure we should actually talk about the results of that poll. I don't know if did you ever go look at it?
I don't know that I did.
Okay, I'm gonna pull this up while my mouse is not working.
Is this on our Substack?
This is on our Substack. Yeah, I've got it. Matt and I asked a question of like, if you had to basically ask students or ask people to which answer would be the least popular answer out of options. So option A, B, C, D, or E. So normally if you said, everybody vote on an answer, which one's going to be the most popular? Most people would probably pick C. I think that's a very common like student, the answer is always C sort of thing. But if you switch it up and say which one would be the least popular answer, did you look at the results?
I just did right now.
Oh, dang. I was going to see if I could get you.
Oh, you're going to try to do it. I
was going to try to get at you. So I will share the results of that. For those of you who don't do the Substack, if you're just listening on Google or listen on Spotify or Apple Music, first off, thank you. But the least popular answer was actually option A. Option B was the most popular. Well, it looks like C and D were tied.
A was the least chosen, least popular. Asks, what do you think will be the least popular? So the fewest people thought it would be least popular.
Yes.
So that's right. Yeah. The majority think the least popular will be B,
which is actually the most popular answer because most people pick that.
Yeah, that's a weird question.
That's why it makes it hard. It's tough.
Thank you to the 25 who respond. So we appreciate that.
We love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so books. Let's talk about books. Matt is I don't want to say a recovering reader. Matt is would you describe yourself as an optimistic reader? How would you describe yourself?
I don't know. I like to read. I do not read nearly as much as you read. I probably read half as many books as you read. I listen a little bit more on Audible. I might read 25 a year total.
Well, hey, if you read half as many as I do, you read way more than the average person.
Well, yeah. 5 is, more than the average.
I wonder if I can find it real fast. So I think, if I remember correctly, so I found the Pew results. We'll put these in the show notes too. A third of Americans say they read both print and digital books in the past year. About a quarter of people say they don't read at all, no books during the year. So I think we're part of a good company, but I think our listeners are probably reading, or maybe they want to read a book. So a few years ago, so we can kind of make this like we'll call it pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, because there's been a lot of great books that have come out since the pandemic. So pre-pandemic, I surveyed a bunch of different economics educators. So I did this back in 2017. So it's been more than 5 years. I really should update it. Maybe we can make an econ happy hour book club or something. Maybe, we could add another thing to our list of things we want to do. So I surveyed 117 different people. And I said, hey, if you had students come up to you and they wanted to start a book club, all right? So let's say, Matt, I'll give you the same prompt. If you had students come up to you at Susquehanna and they said, Dr. Rosu, we want to start a book club. What should be our first book that we should read for our book club? What would you recommend to students who are interested in their first book club, econ, non-econ majors mixed together?
It very much depends on what I think the group is, like what the goal is. So are they going to be reading a huge number? If you're thinking, what's the best? We want the most classic, best econ book.
Yeah, right. So it's non-majors, majors, they're just trying to learn.
And if they're saying we
econ.
Want the best, then I would say Capitalism and Freedom.
Interesting choice. That actually came in at number 10. So that did make the top 10 list.
Make the top 10. So I would think, but it depends. If if it's a group and you're like not sure and you're like, we need something really peppy and fun.
Okay.
It might be something different. I don't know off the top of my head what it is. Once upon a time, it would have been Freakonomics, but now it's been like 15 years, right? I mean,
Freakonomics is the number one recommendation.
Yeah.
There you go. You bookended this, Matt. You didn't even realize.
I like it.
You bookended. You got Freakonomics Freakonomics was the number one by and far and away top recommendation, which I think not surprising. I mean, there's obviously people who hate Freakonomics. I'll link that in the show notes. There's an interesting podcast about that. But no, it's an interesting way of thinking like an economist, right? It has sold over 4 million copies, right? It's got a podcast, a movie, follow-up books. It's popular.
Yeah.
You want to guess any
has in store, right?
You want to guess any of the other ones? I'm kind of curious if you can get some of these other ones. I asked this in 2017.
Let's see, 2017. Would Misbehaving be on there?
Misbehaving is on there. Yes, that's number 2. Okay. Richard Thaler had just recently won the Nobel Prize. So Richard Thaler.
There's got to be something from Krugman or Stiglitz, right? Can you give me the author? Would there be something? I would imagine there's
not anything, not in the top 10.
From Krugman or Stiglitz. Okay. would Capital have made it by Piketty?
No, I think Capital came out the year after that.
No, it was before 17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I taught a class, and I mean, and we read all sorts of books from left to right. Would the Communist Manifesto have made the list?
No.
I mean,
no, but that's an interesting one too. That is an interesting recommendation.
I mean, if you're looking for econ history, right? I mean, it's.
Speaking of econ history, I will say econ history did make the list at number 9.
Econ history.
Okay. History of economic thought, technically, I guess.
Okay. I don't know this, so that's the title of the book.
This, but it's famous. No. Sorry, history of economic thought is the subject.
Okay.
You know this one.
I'm sure I do.
It's a classic. The Worldly Philosophers.
Okay. I do know that, and I don't know that I've read that one, though.
So I have.
Should. Okay.
I don't recommend it. I didn't like it.
Okay. So, other books. I mean, Freakonomics is on there. Are the sequels on there?
Yep. Okay, good. Super Freakonomics comes in as number 8. I was not a super Freakonomics.
Oh man, I like Freakonomics a lot when it came out. Yeah. I thought it was. I don't know that I've ever been more disappointed in a book than Super Freakonomics. I mean, maybe it was because I was excited, but so the first book, it's these neat little problems, and it's an economic way of thinking. The second book is we're going to figure. Okay, the world's biggest problem that nobody can ever figure out. We've got it.
We got it.
Yeah, nobody's been able to
climate
figure it
change,
out.
terrorism,
every single thing right. I mean, like the sheer arrogance on it. So I was wildly disappointed, and and part of it was the first book was kind of so revolutionary in some ways.
Yeah.
But
so I will say there's another Thaler book in there. You got Misbehaving. What's his other book?
Nudge is in there.
Okay.
Yep. So now
you're knocking these out.
We've got 4 from we've got the Freakonomics, Super Freakonomics. We've got Nudge, and we've got Misbehaving.
So that gives you 4.
We've got Capitalism and Freedom. That's 5, and we have Worldly Philosophers for 6.
Yes. So I'll give you genres. Will that help?
Okay.
So we have 2 behavioral ones. They come in at 3 and 4. And we have 2 general economics is what I'll consider them.
Okay.
Just broad econ.
I would, if I'm teaching a class that has 8 or 9 books, Thomas Sowell is absolutely one of them, and I wouldn't imagine he made the list. That's why
he did not make the list of the general economics.
I would
say broader.
I would think Tyler Cohen has some good work, but I wouldn't think he does. I mean, is it like the economic naturalist kind of books? It's like those kinds.
It's like those kind. It's not that one, but it's like those. This is tough because like one of them I actually haven't read. I've read most of these. I didn't read one of them. I just wasn't interested.
Naked Economics, kind of
number 6.
That is on there. Okay.
Number 6. Yeah, Charlie Whelan.
And for the pop. Okay, who in the world are the other? I'm trying to think. What are the other behavioral books that have been recent? The Nobel Prize winner, Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes, that's number 3. Matt, you're good at this. You're having flashbacks like 5 years ago. Well, that's said pre-pandemic. Our answer, I think my answers would definitely change of like what's my favorite books since this list came out. I likely would have recommended a group to read Freakonomics. If they hadn't read it, like that's a great book club book.
Yep.
I would have recommended Misbehaving. I kind of looked through this list. I'm like, I would have recommended some of these.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would recommend them now. I think there's better books now.
Sure.
He's definitely up there. So do you want me to give them away? Or you want to guess?
Yeah, you can give them away. I think we've stalled the audience's time enough.
Number 4, Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely.
Yep.
And number 7, Economics Rules, Danny Roderick.
Okay.
Which I thought was an interesting, right? It's that general econ sort of perspective.
Okay.
So part of the reason Matt and I wanted to talk about this is right at summertime, instead of giving you teaching advice, a lot of our listeners are winding down for the summer. The professors out there have probably been wound down for a little bit. Our high school teachers have, I hope that you're enjoying summer break and you're getting a chance to kind of rest and relax if possible. But we figured now would be a good time to, talk about books in case you need something to read for the month of July. And so that was the list, 5 years ago, the most popular econ books at the time. If you had, let's say, not a student, but an economics teacher, an economics professor who just, wasn't reading before, but wants to start reading, what would you recommend to them? And
once again, a lot of it's context dependent. So go through. I am re-listening to Knowledge and Decisions by Thomas Sowell
Okay.
right now, which I think is a fantastic and humbling book. And
Knowledge
it's a
and
long
decisions.
book. It's
Okay.
a very long book. But it is just kind of interesting and thinking about how are decisions made and
Mhm.
how what are the entities that would make decisions correct or incorrect, like come to the right or the wrong, what are the incentive structure on the decision making bodies. So that's one that's interesting. I don't know that I recommend that to everybody. I think that's actually a really good one for econ professors and almost any
Okay.
professors, anybody who has an audience to have a platform for discussing public policy, I think
Okay.
should read Knowledge and Decision. So I think that's better almost for professors than others. Now, if
Mhm.
you're looking for a really fun one that I read recently, Peter Leeson wrote The Invisible Hook.
Hook. Yeah, that's
That's
an interesting one.
just a lot of fun on the economics of pirates. Um,
Let me pause and interject here, right? Because I don't know if you heard what Matt just said. He did say the economics of pirates. And if you're wondering how in the world can pirates tell you about economics, one, you need to read Pete's book because it
yes.
is super interesting. But I'll give you just a little preview of that book that is always just so fascinating. Right, pirates don't want to fight other people, and so it talks about how like the Jolly Roger flag is like a great symbol of signaling, and it's supposed
Yep.
to sort of scare you and force you into just surrendering, because otherwise they're just going to kill you instead. And so it's a super fascinating book. I love that book. It's just so different and so cool.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I won't spoil more, but just the way they organize their business, the way they paid wages
Yeah,
within
where you
the
have a bunch
entity.
of criminals, you have to organize criminals to not be criminals on the boat, right? Like,
It's really
yeah,
it's
that's a
really
good one.
fascinating. So I've got more that I've read recently that I really liked, but I'll give one more
Okay.
shout out to, the likely future Nobel Prize winner, University of Chicago economist, and now the chief economist at Walmart,
John
John Litt.
List. Okay.
John List wrote The Voltage Effect.
Yeah, I read that actually recently. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. So I'll be fair. John List is on Twitter, so I will tag him and say that we talked about him.
Yeah.
I did not think I was going to like it. I read the summary of it and I bought the book just as like a support type thing. And I was like, I'm not going to start a business. I'm not an entrepreneur. I was sort of buying it so that I could read it to say that I read it. And then I sat down and started reading it. And I was like, oh my God, this is not about what I thought the book was about.
Yeah.
And it was actually much better.
No, scaling good ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like thinking through it. So I thought that was fantastic. So I've mentioned a few. I could go through more, but I will give you a second to name a couple recent books
second
that you might throw out, or a few.
Okay. So if I was recommending books to people, I think exactly what you said, right? Like the audience definitely matters. But if I try to imagine if I had to recommend an economics book to, I'm going to be very broad and say just like, right, people who are interested in economics in some form or fashion, I'm going to give you, I'll give you two. I'll give you two that I really like that are relatively recent. And then I'll give you one that is, I'm going to say you have to be very nerdy in order to like my third option.
Okay.
So the two that I really like that I would recommend to just about anybody, one is called 50 Inventions That Shaped the Modern Economy by Tim Harford. Absolutely amazing. So you mentioned earlier his book, The Undercover Economist. He was really famous for that when it came out. Sort of this idea of like, how does an economist like look at these problems and like uncover stories? Like that was sort of the pitch on it. This book, 50 Inventions That Shaped the Modern Economy, is, I mean, it kind of gives it away, right? There's 50 things that he's going to talk about. And he sort of does, it's like every invention, I'm going to put inventions in quotes, even though you can't see me moving my fingers. It's inventions or things that society has come up with that has really changed what we're doing today. And he even opens and talks about how like, it's not going to be, he's not going to say the cell phone. Like the cell phone has obviously changed the modern economy. Like it changed how we survive. He tries to go like a little bit deeper. So like one of the examples in there, I think he opens with the idea of like the plow, of how like the plow actually had for agriculture just such a bigger, like a bigger impact than you could ever imagine. So like one of the examples is like the shipping container, of how they used to ship stuff before, stacking it all on ships. And then all of a sudden you can commodify and and stick it all in a shipping container. And so it's that sort of thing. Like, how has a shipping container changed the economy today? How has like the welfare state changed the economy today? He talks about like birth control. How did that change how women participate in the workforce today? Super fascinating. And what I really like about it is each invention is essentially, because it's a single book, each invention is only like 4 pages long. So he sort of kind of rapid fire goes through the backstory of it.
Those are nice books to read.
Absolutely. It's so good. I really, really enjoyed it.
I haven't read that. I've added that to my list here.
It's a nice mix of like history, economics. You know, he tries to present it not as economics, but he'll say things, right? He'll talk about externalities. He'll talk about transaction costs, things like that. So that one, fascinating book. Number 2 came out right during the pandemic, or like shortly after the pandemic. So I'm checking. Yeah, published September 2020. It is called Money, and I don't know if we've actually talked about this on this podcast.
I believe I have read Money.
Okay,
I'm looking through my list right now on Audible, but I believe I've had it on Audible. Oh no, I read The Psychology of Money, not Money.
So this is Money, the true story of a made-up thing by Jacob Goldstein. So Jacob Goldstein used to be the host of Planet Money, so you probably recognize it. You know, those of you who like Planet Money or NPR, you likely recognize his voice from a lot of those stories. It is essentially like a Planet Money telling of how money sort of came about. So it opens up with talking about, and now I can't think of the name of the person, but right, there's this idea of a singer who's traveling and she gets paid in chickens and fruit and vegetables, but like, how is she supposed to actually take this with her? So you need money in order to do that. So it kind of works its way through the evolution of money, talking about barter and then seashells and then coins and then notes and then digital money. And so the setup of it, I really like it because it presents a scenario and it says, you know, how do we pay for this? You know, we pay for things with barter. You know, you're going to work for us and we're going to give you a bunch of chickens and pigs and bread. And so it kind of talks about why that works. And then at the end of the chapter, it says, yeah, but those things go bad. Like, you don't want to carry around chickens for everything you've done.
Yep.
And then it introduces the next thing. So it says like, okay, now we'll use rocks. And then it talks about sort of, I think, the old like seashell example of trading shells. And then it says, well, here's the problem with shells. Now we've introduced notes, or I guess coins would be next. And then it talks about how people shave off coins. So then they use paper notes. So it's a really neat sort of chronological history. But towards the end, you know, it talks about things like digital currency. So it does talk about like checking, credit cards, things like that. But then it gets into Bitcoin, cryptocurrency a little bit. It does talk about modern monetary theory a little bit. And then especially because it came out right in kind of the midst of the pandemic, it talks a little bit about, you know, spending in that sense. So fascinating sort of macro history. If you are a high school teacher who's teaching principles of or AP macro, if you're a principles of macro instructor, you're going to recognize all of this probably from your curriculum of barter, notes, you know, what is money, but it's got great stories in it. Really cool.
No, very cool. Very cool. So what's your third?
Okay. So I said I'm going to give you 2 econ ones. So if you're listening to this podcast, those 2 books should be right up your alley. Absolutely. I think any of you would enjoy that. Matt, I'm going to give you the weirdest book recommendation I have ever given somebody as a book recommendation. But I found it so fascinating. And this is going to be, I think, it's going to exemplify how absolutely nerdy I am, you are. And I think when I tell you what this book is, I think you're going to pause for a second, but you're actually going to think about how cool this is. The book is called, it was published in 2008. The book is called The Drunkard's Walk: How Randomness Rules Our Lives. Have you heard of this book?
Don't believe I have.
Oh my God. It is so cool. It is actually a history telling of statistics. And so it talks about how, back hundreds of years ago, we didn't understand how like probabilities work and how chance worked. And so like they didn't understand that if you rolled, I think they talked about like a 6-sided log, how if you rolled a 6-sided log, they could not comprehend how you had a 1 in 6 chance of landing it on one side, like what we know as very obvious probability statistics. Yeah. So it talks about like Bayes' rule, and it talks about like Bernoulli, and like where the Bernoulli distribution comes from, and who is Bernoulli, and where it is like you'll read it and you'll recognize these stats names. So it'll talk about Gauss and like the Gaussian distribution. But it's all about kind of statistics and where they came from. And it kind of does this like back and forth of like, here's history and here's how like we didn't understand how probabilities work. And then like some people sort of understood. And so they could like take advantage of people who didn't understand. And then like that's where new laws came from and stuff. Absolutely fascinating book about sort of this like mix of history but it's all about statistics. So you've really got to be interested in statistics. And
I think I would enjoy that. You've given me some books I haven't read, so I'm looking forward to getting them. So why don't we each give 2 more, and then we'll have given the initial 10, and then between us we'll have given another 10.
Yeah, I mean, like, listen, if our listeners can't pick one of these books that sounded interesting.
So I will go a little bit off topic, and it's not an econ book, but there's so much when I read this that was economics. That was really fascinating. And I'm cheating a little bit because it's a 3-book series. Yeah. But so, the series is called the Century Trilogy. Okay. So these are not small books. They're by Ken Follett. Is the author.
Yes, I've heard of these. Yeah.
Fall of Giants, Winter of the World, and Edge of Eternity. And it follows a number of families, basically starting in 1900 through 2000. It's historical fiction, but it is fascinating as you're living through the family when they're living through hyperinflation. And when you're living through the family who's going through breadlines and communism, and when you're living through just like all of the things that happen. And it's very much not econ. It's just kind of pleasure reading, but they're long books. I mean, I'm guessing to read the 3, it's 2,000 pages total, probably. I mean, I'm guessing these are 700 each, but it's very much more beach reading maybe than an econ book, but it's really entertaining.
Look, I got a 1,000-page beach read.
Hey, that's how Hamilton came about. Lin-Manuel Miranda picked up Ron Chernoff's massive Alexander Hamilton book for a vacation. And after about 5 pages, he goes, "This is just like Tupac." And that's how he wrote Hamilton. But so who knows? Maybe somebody will write the next musical based on reading this. So that's
okay.
That's not an econ one, but audience might like it. The other one is econ, and we actually are having one of the authors come to campus in October. So it's Leave Me Alone and I'll Make You Rich. I have that book over on the other. I bought that recently. You have is Art coming? Art Carden is coming. Okay. Yep. Deirdre McCloskey, Art Carden. It's a little bit, they frame it this way. It's McCloskey wrote, speaking of 2,000 pages of book, like 3 books called the Bourgeois Trilogy. And this is a much more condensed down version, summary version of, and I thought it was a really great book. So looking forward to actually having Art come to Susquehanna in early October. That's open to the public. If anybody wants to come visit Susquehanna, I believe it is Thursday, October 5th, I believe. I will. That's when the International Atlantic Economics Conference, I believe, is. There's a conference in Philadelphia that weekend. I don't know. Maybe they'll parlay that visit into the so you could go to Philly after. You could come to Susquehanna and then go to Philly after. So you've got 2 more books for the audience now. I can give you 2. So I'll give you 2 non-econ one. I'm going to call them non-econ. Oh man, I might want to give you 3. This could be a very book. Only 2. One. You got it. They save the other one will be saved. This is tough. I really like to read. I opened 2, and then as I was scrolling through my Goodreads, I saw a 3rd one that I considered. Okay, I'll give you these 2 because I think I would sell these 2 harder than I would sell the 3rd one. The 3rd one was interesting, but these are 2 better ones. One of them is one that I assigned to my Economics of Crime course when I last taught it last spring. It was last spring. So it's a fascinating book. It is not intended to be an economics book, but he talks a lot about economics in it. So it was published in 2018 by Shane Bauer. He's an undercover journalist for a newspaper company, Mother Jones, I think is what it was. So he's an undercover reporter, or investigative reporter. He wrote it, I think, for them. What he did was he went undercover at a private prison in Louisiana to sort of see what it's like being a security or a prison guard in a private prison. So he's obviously never been a public
he's never been at a regular prison, but a state prison. He's never been in one of those. So he talks about essentially, what is the behavior like? What's the background check like? He was hired for $9 an hour to work as an entry-level prison guard at a private prison in Louisiana. But what was really interesting, this is where I said the econ sort of comes in. The way that he sets up the book, I thought was really neat. He basically has a chapter that's about his experience, like what he's doing. So he's like, yeah, here I went to apply for the job and here was the process. And they sort of hired me without a background check. So he talks about it. And then in the very next chapter, like the even chapters 2, 4, 6, 8, he is giving you like sort of the history of prisons. So like chapter 2 is, where did prisons start in the United States? The answer is actually Philadelphia, surprisingly. So the idea that like we brought prisoners over, but they were like indentured servants, but we actually started the first prison, and talking about like the role of deterrence and manual labor and like having people work outside as like showing people not to commit crimes. And then like chapter 3 in the book is talking about like his training experience. So you sort of see this, it's a chronological story in the odd chapters of his experience, and then a chronological like history, sociology, economics of prisons. So it eventually talks like, where did we come up with the idea of private prisons? So that's later in the book, things like that. Super fascinating. Book. So there's that one. So I'm gonna say not econ, but like it's got some econ in it. I really like history. So I have always been, I always think like, if you could go back to college, what degree would you get? What would you do differently, or would you do something differently? I think I would get a minor in history. I don't think I would major in it.
Yeah.
But I find history fascinating, which is, so I'll say I find it fascinating, but also frustrating because maybe I'll just sell out my own learning in this process. I don't feel like I was taught history very well. Growing up, but like now that I'm older and I can sort of connect events better, I find history super fascinating. I feel like when I learned history, you learn it so chronologically of like, here's the date, here's what happened, but you like learn US history. And then you take another class that you learn world history. And you can't really connect that things are happening at the same time. So I'm constantly like shocked at like dates and like how not long ago things were.
Sure.
Like that should be way longer. But one of the really cool books I read a few years ago, it came out in 2019. It's a thick one. It's 500 pages long, but I thought it was fascinating. It's called How to Hide an Empire, A History of the Greater United States. Have you read that one?
No, you've recommended it before, and I've had it on a list, and I just haven't gotten it yet.
So the idea broadly for our listeners is the United States was founded on this idea that empires are bad. So this idea, right? Like we want to fight the British Empire. It's not fair. We shouldn't be connected to them. We should be our own country. That sort of empires are bad was essentially kind of American Revolution. And then it talks about this idea that we've kind of grow up with this idea that empires are bad. We're taught that empires are bad. Meanwhile, the United States is forming an empire off of the Virgin Islands and Guam and Puerto Rico and taking Hawaii. And like, we are essentially empire building without actually calling it an empire, or things like having a military base in like almost every country. We're doing empire-ish things, but we're hiding this empire and not saying we're doing empirical things. So it's super interesting kind of from a framing standpoint, but it talks a lot about, why is the, we owned the Philippines for a while. Like, why is there such a weird relationship with the Philippines versus today? The purpose of Puerto Rico, things like that. So it was super interesting from a history standpoint. Yeah.
Well, hopefully for our listeners, if you have read every single book we've talked about, first we need to hear from you and how in the world that happened. But no, appreciate everybody tuning in. Hopefully you found a book or two. I think talking about books is probably close enough to research where we don't have to talk about a research paper. Any pop culture jumping out at you that you might want to share?
Ooh. Yeah, so actually this is gonna be a weird connection of pop culture, but I think I can make it work. I assign reading in all of my courses. So I am a very big believer. I don't know if this comes from my undergrad experience or what. Like my undergrad, the professors there were really big on assigning us, like, right, I read Freakonomics as part of a course. But they were very big on like read a book or read chapters from a book to sort of see what economics is happening like in things you read. So I've always really liked that. I do the same thing. So in my principles course, I assign Think Like a Freak. In my crime course, I assign That American Prison book, but I also assign Narconomics. In my labor economics course, I assigned New Geography of Jobs and We Wanted Workers. So like I've always sort of assigned books as part of the reading. It just makes it better than a textbook. But what's interesting, and I think this is not going to be surprising, that my students don't always read the book. They just don't read the book, and that's fine.
We were all students, and
I was a student. I know they don't read it. My answer is just read it eventually, right? Like if you didn't read it this week, catch up next week. So pop culture wise, I can actually mix this together. I mentioned it earlier, kind of briefly. Freakonomics was the top book recommendation 5 years ago on that. Like, would you recommend to a group? There is actually a Freakonomics movie. So if you don't want to read the book, you can watch the movie, and that'll get you halfway there. I don't know which streaming platform it's on. But there is a movie and there's a scene in it where they're talking about like, how do we incentivize kids to learn more? And it talks about paying kids to get better grades and things like that. And there's a scene in there where the kid goes home to talk to his mom and he's telling his mom how he didn't do very well. And his mom's like, well, did you read the book? And he goes, well, I have the book. And like, she goes, that's not what I asked you. I said, did you read the book? And he goes, yeah, I read the book. And she goes, did you read the book? It's like, it's going back and forth. And he goes, no, I didn't really do it. And so I have that clipped actually in class. And so once they start in the beginning, they read and then they start to slow down like week 3, 4. I put that back up and I play that for them. I'm like, but did you really read it? And so I play that. But I guess we could say pop culture with books. We should actually recommend, we talked about this a couple episodes ago. A Beautiful Mind is based off of a book. So Sylvia, I believe it's Sylvia Nassar. I'm not good at.
Yes, I believe that's the name. I do not know the pronunciation.
My pronunciation's probably wrong. But when we talked about A Beautiful Mind a couple episodes ago about John Nash and kind of his story and health, mental health issues, like the movie was fantastic with Russell Crowe, but it was based on a book. So we can say that some of these books may become movies one day, which I guess kind of makes it pop culture-ish. In a sense. So I hope I don't get that one from you.
I don't have a good book, like from a book. I mean, the Century Trilogy, honestly, is probably, I could argue with that. I'll tell everybody a sneak peek of one that I have coming out soon, though. For those who are 80s sitcom fans, so this is before your time, Jadrian, but although who knows, maybe you watch the reruns. We've got an episode coming out where the title of video on YouTube coming out, which how much did Norm spend on beer? From Cheers. Okay. And we kind of do a dive and we start to figure out the cost of beer and the assumptions and just the opportunity cost of what could have been done with that is kind of staggering. So that's it's not at all related to what we're talking about, except we do enjoy having a drink on our
I still have a lot of this beer left because it is sour. And it is a tall beer, so
it is a tall beer. So
I'm going to slowly drink this.
We're drinking responsibly. So
let me add one other thing for any of our listeners out there. There is a great organization run out of Arizona called Econoful that I want to highlight real quick. Econoful is run by amazing people. They've just got a really great team of people. They do regularly put out, I think they call it like 6 books. They put out a book list, like I think every half year or so. Like I don't know the dates that they actually do it. I don't know if they do it like December and if they do it like December and June or something like that. But they do put out a book list of like 6 books you should be reading, and it is intended for like economics audiences. So Econoful is a great group of people.
It's a great Twitter follow.
Like they do a lot of really cool stuff, especially for high school teachers. They are based out of Arizona, but everything's online. They're a nonprofit group kind of focused on middle school, high school people, but highly recommend following them, if you're a teacher, get subscribed to them because then you can also get book recommendations. And so I've picked up some of the books that they've recommended as well. I just got the Edible Economics, I think is what it's called. They recommended this a couple weeks ago. It's called A Hungry Economist Explains the World. By Ha-Joon Chang. I'm not sure. Okay. I think he's Korean. He's a Korean economist who's written some other books. So I get book recommendations from them. They do just really cool, amazing stuff. So I will shout out that if you need more book recommendations.
Yeah. We'll put our show notes are going to be tough on this one because there's a lot of links, but we'll link to all of these in the show notes.
There is a feature that allows me to create a scroll of images. So we'll just put all the book images together.
So, well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you are listening to this on your podcast app, if you could leave us a 5-star review, we'd appreciate that. I was just scrolling through, and maybe it's because it's mine, but if I go to other podcasts, they'll have like the rating right below the names. And I do not believe we have enough people who've rated us where that's coming in, at least on Apple yet.
I'll get on Apple Podcast. I'm not an Apple Podcast listener, but I will at least log on and leave my 5-star review.
That's if you like this, please do leave a review with it is even better. It could be short and sweet. If you don't like us, don't bother. You don't have to worry about that. Yeah, but
just close. If you don't like us, just close the app and don't worry about it.
I'm guessing most people who made it to minute 40 with us are probably more likely to do that. But thank you to everybody. Jadrian, it was great to talk with you again.
Cheers, Matt.
Cheers.